Uh-huh.
Okay.
Very good. Okay. So I see we have 29 participants. We had 80 registered, so we may be getting some more people joining, but let me formally welcome all of you to this workshop. It's co-sponsored by the Interfaith Landlord Locator Project, which has been funded by Enterprise Partners. That project is ending as of the end of this year, but we are evolving into what we're calling the Interfaith Voucher Support Project. And so today is really our first meeting of that effort. And again, the premise is that we believe if we can find landlords who are open to accepting vouchers and members of communities that are supportive of voucher holders, we hope that we can reduce the delay and the distance and the time required to make those connections. So we're going to have a conversation, taking a look at that, hearing from various participants. And so what I'd like to do is ask everyone if they could introduce themselves in the chat, and then I will ask the speakers from today's workshop, various topics to introduce themselves. And I can start with Adrian, and I'll call on the participants. So Adrian, why don't you introduce yourself first?
Yep, my name is Adrian Best. I'm the Landlord Engagement Manager at New Destiny Housing Corporation.
Thank you. Drew, you want to introduce yourself?
My name is Drew Oldfield. I've been the project coordinator for the Interfaith Landlord Locator Project with the Interfaith Assembly on Housing and Homelessness.
Thank you. Pietro?
Hi, everyone. My name is Pietro Bartoli. I'm with the community of Sant'Egidio.
Thank you. Sarah, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Sorry, I have a little bit of a cold, so I'm turning off the camera and blowing my nose. Sarah Zeiderveen, Senior Advisor at DSS for Housing and Homelessness.
Great, thank you. And Peter, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Peter Cook, and I'm the Executive Director of the New York State Council of Churches.
Okay, thank you. And I'm wondering if I've missed anyone, any of our speakers who've joined us. If so, oh, and I'm sorry. And Allison, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Allison Boehm, and I've been working with Mark and Peter and Drew as part of the Interfaith Landlord Locator Project this past year on behalf of the nonprofit organization called Bricks and Mortals.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, good. So we're expecting a few more. We're expecting actually Reverend James Addison of the Life Experience and Faith Sharing Associates and Minister Chibuze with the Church of Gethsemane. So when they come in, we'll ask them to introduce themselves, unless it's already their time to share. So with that, let me again share this agenda so we can see where we're at. Here we are. Is this it? Yes. Yes, here we are. And so, oh, and here we have a few more folks joining. Welcome. Just to let, well, I guess they'll know that we're recording. So here's our agenda. So we're pretty much on time. So what we want to do now is ask Peter Cook, who's the executive director of the New York State Council of Churches, to kind of ground us in the moral framing of why are we doing this. So Peter, floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Mark. And it's a pleasure to be with all of you today. We are in the season of Hanukkah, headed towards Christmas. And this is a time when our charity activities as faith communities go into full throttle. We're putting together gift bags, offering food cards and turkeys, giving out small amounts of cash assistance, and even a temporary bed for the night. And it's all distributed with lots of holiday cheer. At least that's the case until we move on to some other activity in the new year. As one of my colleagues on Long Island likes to remind congregations, People are hungry 365 days a year, not just during Thanksgiving and Christmas time. Charity is good as it goes, but we have to stop and ask ourselves why there is an endless amount of need coming to our door. Our response as religious institutions must be oriented towards answering two questions. One, what is going on with people that requires so much charity on our part? And two, what can religious people do to address the structural problem? One of the big reasons so many people struggle to make ends meet is because the cost of housing is way too high. In the state of New York, in every part of the state, suburban, rural, and urban, 50% of our population must spend more than 30% of their income on housing. Many are spending 50% or more of their income on housing, and still more can't afford housing at any price and become homeless. Will we, as a faith community, in response, act like the innkeeper and throw a few crumbs out the door and say there's no room in the inn, and let Mary and Joseph find an outside stable or live on the street? That, unfortunately, is the response that so many in our faith communities offers to those in need who come to our door. But it doesn't have to be that way. One big way we can make a big difference is to get housing vouchers into people's hands. Vouchers don't require people to give more than 30% of their income, no matter how small that income is, towards their housing. We have several voucher programs which you will hear about today. One is the Emergency Housing Voucher Program, which comes to us through the federal government and is administered through the city. And the other is the City FEPS Vouchers Program. You will also hear today about how to access these programs if you are a landlord agreeing to take a voucher or a voucher holder looking for a landlord. You will hear what is working and also what is not working, and then how you can do something about it and advocate for change. And you will also hear about legislative efforts at the state level to pass a statewide housing access voucher program for anyone in the state and not just New York City. So if you are a faith community, our suggestion is to make an announcement in your services and in your newsletters and pose 4 questions. Ask, 1, if you have any landlords in your congregation who would consider taking a housing voucher. 2, find out if you have any parishioners who are struggling to find housing or struggling to stay in their home, and ask how they are accessing all the resources available to them. 3, find out if anyone is a voucher holder in your congregation having trouble finding a landlord who will accept a voucher. And 4, is there anyone in your congregation who would be willing to offer support to navigate the voucher process? And finally, on the state level, in terms of advocacy, we invite you to come to the Ecumenical and Interfaith Advocacy Day in Albany on February 27th and 28th, where you can lift up your voice in the halls of power to access housing for all people, and particularly advocate for the Housing Access Voucher Program, among other programs to address the housing crisis in our state. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Peter. Let me say that we now have 41 people here. That's great. Welcome to everyone. If you haven't yet put your name and your organization in the chat, please do so, and we'll be keeping track. So as Peter said, today we want to do a little summary of what vouchers are. Then we're going to learn how to use them. So just to start, again, a voucher is a payment to a tenant to help make up the difference between what their income is and what housing is that is available. And as Peter said, there are, of course, 3 levels of government. There's city, state, and federal. At the federal level, most of us know about the Section 8 vouchers. The Section 8 vouchers are federally guaranteed. They've been operating for many, many years. Public housing is Section 8 housing. There are Section 8 project-based housing and Section 8 voucher-based, so that some people have a voucher that they can take and go to a private landlord, and some people are living in public housing using Section 8, the Section 8 voucher program. As Peter mentioned, recently we've had this new voucher which came to the state as a result of COVID, the EHV, emergency housing voucher. We have been working to find landlords for those vouchers, and we'll hear a little more about that later. But those are only there were 7,700 available to the state. Virtually all of them are already allocated. So those are very hard to get at this point unless you have one. There's also, but the city FEPS voucher, and I believe, and Sarah may correct me, I believe there are about 20,000 outstanding city FEPS vouchers. And the city FEPS voucher is available to people in shelters who are working a certain amount of hours, but not over a certain amount. And these vouchers, as Peter said, if an individual finds a landlord, an apartment that fits within the voucher range, the voucher will allow you to pay only, require that you pay only 30% of your income in rent. And a little history on the city FEPS voucher. Well, a long history, which I won't go into, but there, when the Section 8 vouchers about 10 years ago started to dry up, the city tried to come up with some alternatives. And ultimately, we arrived at the city FEPS voucher. But until recently, under Mayor de Blasio, there were at least initially 16,000 vouchers out there. But the problem was that at any one time, there were only 500 apartments citywide that could be rented for the vouchers that were available, which obviously is absurd. Well, under the leadership of Steve Levin, who was then the chair of the General Welfare Committee, with support from a group that we've been part of, Homes Can't Wait, that voucher level was increased about a year and a half ago to the point where at that point there were 70,000 apartments citywide that could be rented for that voucher. The challenge is that because of some cuts under Bloomberg many years ago and some resistance and some administrative challenges, many landlords have not, the vouchers have been very hard to use. In fact, some people report that they've waited 9 months. In fact, we heard of someone who has a voucher for 2 years, has not been able to access an apartment. So we're here today to try to see if we can reduce that significantly, and we'll hear more about those vouchers and the processes soon. The other voucher that Peter mentioned at the state level, HVAP, Housing Voucher Access Program. This is a program that is being proposed at the state level. The nice thing about this voucher is it doesn't require that you are homeless to access the voucher. You have to be at risk of homelessness or struggling with your housing costs. We're hoping that this will pass the state legislature. The effort's being led by Senator Brian Kavanaugh, and we will provide some information in this workshop shortly about how you can weigh in and sign on to support that effort. Again, it would make a big difference because anyone who's struggling with housing would be eligible. It would be initially a small number, about 10,000 voucher holders would be eligible, and we're hoping we can increase that. Let me just say one more thing. At the federal level, Congressman Richie Torres has been trying to move a federal voucher program forward. In virtually every congressional district in the whole country, people are struggling with housing. And we feel that it's much less expensive to give people a little bit of difference between what they're earning and what housing costs than to end up paying $40,000, $50,000 in a shelter, or even worse, have people in hospitals or in jail because they can't afford the difference between what they're getting and the housing that's available. So with that, let me turn it over to Adrian. Adrian Best is someone we began to work with in our Innovate Landlord Locator project. Adrian works with New Destiny and will tell us how vouchers work. And it's just great to know that if you know what you're doing and you're working with the right partners, then you can actually make it work. So Adrian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mark. And as he mentioned, I just got started with New Destiny back in June. So what I was trying to do when I started was try to help facilitate relationships between CBOs and landlords and agents that are trying to connect to our clients. New Destiny is a nonprofit that provides housing and services to victims of domestic violence. So we are also working alongside family justice centers to meet clients where they're at and provide them with permanent and stable housing. I'm going to go through the process a little bit of how leasing up works with the voucher, just because, as we mentioned, there's been a lot of delays with those that have found housing, those that have been able to get started with their landlords, submit their packages, and we're seeing a lot of delays from that. So a lot of the reason why we get together is to brainstorm on how can we improve the systems, and the best way is to first start off knowing how these programs work. I'm gonna share my screen really quick. Am I able to do that?
Yes, you can.
Okay, and the EHV program is a form of Section 8. Most of our clients hold this voucher, and
Just want to be
they
sure.
use
Can
this
everyone see
voucher.
Adrian's screen? I'm not sure. I can't. No.
Oh, I
Okay.
haven't shared it yet.
Oh, you haven't?
Mhm.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you.
Yep, just introing into
Right.
the
Okay,
emergency
fine.
housing voucher program.
Thanks, Adrian.
So this is the voucher that most of our clients have. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
And again, this voucher was awarded, a limited number of them were awarded to NYCHA and HPD. So that's New York City's Housing Authority and the Department of Housing Preservation and Development. So obviously for the EHV, the eligibility is going to be 1, that you're homeless, 2, that you're at risk of homelessness, 3, that you're fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, human trafficking, or 4, recently homeless and at risk of housing instability. So at this stage in the program, they're no longer collecting and processing emergency housing vouchers. At this time, what they're doing is the clients that have the vouchers are connected to housing navigators or something similar to a housing specialist that is helping them with their housing search. So this is where the landlord connector would be very helpful, in that we would work together to identify those vacancies across New York City and connect them to those specialists that are on the ground with the clients themselves that hold the vouchers, and basically providing them with support. And once those vouchers or those tenants identify the housing that they're going to lease up with, they're going to submit those applications for housing to either NYCHA or HPD. And for this example, we'll use NYCHA's lease up process. So if a client has a NYCHA Section 8 voucher, the landlord is going to log on to NYCHA's owner extranet website. Here's a thumbnail of how that looks here. And basically the owner extranet holds the application in which the landlord will need to complete. And this application is verifying deed ownership, is going through information about the home, making sure it's suitable, asking questions about the lead status. They're going to have to fill in more information in regards to the unit, in regards to the certificate of occupancy, whether that's something that is required for that unit, if it was built after 1938, if the owner would be collecting the rent as direct deposit, they'll need to complete a W-9. So all of this information is input into the system. After that, the public housing agency, and for this example, NYCHA would review that rental package that takes an estimate of 10 business days. And just going back to our point originally, that we are seeing longer timeframes for this to happen. So this is usually where the delays start to happen. Sometimes the landlord might be missing documents, missing signatures. The rent amount that they put on that package might be incorrect. And just to segue, talking about the rent, even though that the vouchers come with a payment standard, they do still assess the area and ensure that the rent is comparable to that area that they're submitting the package for. So if the PHA does an assessment and they determine that the rent is too high, they're going to counter and ask and propose a new rent in which the owner has the chance to accept or withdraw. So after that, and I will say that the NYCHA has been scheduling inspections during the review. So they've been doing it at the same time so they could speed things up. And that has been helping. So after the review is completed, and let's say that all these things are correct or there were no corrections, then they would schedule what's known as the housing quality inspection. So they're going to come to the home and ensure that the gas is working, that there are smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, every bedroom has a window, all the rooms are the proper size. There's a whole checklist, but they're going to make sure that information is, they're going to check all that information off to make sure that the unit is suitable for habitability. Okay. And just a side note that not all units need to pass inspection. If the unit, if the failures are non-life-threatening, then the client will have the chance to sign what's known as a non-life-threatening waiver so that they can just proceed with the lease-up process. We haven't seen too many of those, gratefully. If the inspection passes, then they will send the client a conditional move-in letter. They will send the landlord a housing assistance payment contract, which basically initiates the binding contract between the landlord and the PHA, so NYCHA in this case. The landlord will sign that document, send it back to NYCHA. NYCHA will sign it on their end, and thus the tenancy will begin. So at that point, the client would move in, and then NYCHA would pay their first subsidy portion. It does sound pretty simple from here. It should go, just pretty much down the line as I just showed you, but there's so many different things that can happen throughout the step-by-step process. And we, with Mark and the other CBOs that have been working in the other initiative, we have seen a lot of different reasons as to why this can fall apart. So it's very important on the landlord engagement side of things to have a strong relationship built with that owner or agent. So if something happens throughout this process, either A, they're going to be flexible, B, if that client cannot go into that unit, they're flexible about us putting in someone else, or they're plain old just going to come back to us if this unit is no longer acceptable and we need to move forward and look at something new. So let me do this. And lastly, wanted to just talk a little bit about the grant fund package that comes with the emergency housing voucher. So all clients that have emergency housing vouchers will get assistance with the broker fees. So that amount is covered up to 15% of the annual rent. So you're taking that rent amount, multiplying it times 12, and 15% of that's what the brokers would be eligible for. Each client also gets assistance with their security voucher or 1 month in lieu of deposit, as well as specialized administrative support. So for example, with my team, hold on one second. So with my team, when I refer to specialized administrative support, basically guiding the owner through the process, making sure if they have any questions, they only have one point of contact. So it's not very confusing for them, all the different people that might be involved. There's also the housing specialists that are assisting the client when they have questions. So that administrative support is very key to making sure that the owners don't feel overwhelmed by the process with Section 8 and that things go along as they should. Yeah, I think that's it for me. Mark, is there anything else that you wanted me to touch on in regards to that?
Well, let me just say, Adrian, you're terrific. It's so good to hear your mastery of the process, which you said sounds simple. It's not simple to others, but it's great. And let me just say that Adrian has been at HPD, so Adrian's seen it from both sides, and it's terrific to have professionals who realize it's really mostly about it's about the technical issues, but it's also about relationships. If you have a relationship with a landlord and they understand what the issues are, you can work them through. It's not that someone is trying to make it difficult. These are things that are required to make a tenancy work. So thank you so much, Adrian. Really appreciate working with you. It's a pleasure working with you. So now I wanted to spend a little time on looking at what, if we can drill down a little bit more on what the challenges that people have faced with regard to vouchers. You touched on them, which is that sometimes the technical issues have to be addressed. But I'm wondering if anybody else, maybe Pietro might want to talk about. So Pietro, why don't you introduce yourself? Also, before you do that, let me introduce myself. I haven't done that. I'm Mark Greenberg. I'm the director of a group called the Interfaith Assembly on Homelessness and Housing. We've been working on homelessness and housing issues for almost 40 years. We work directly with the faith community, work with advocates, we work with homeless self-help communities, and with city agencies and others. We try to really bring people together to find solutions. And it's great to be here with everybody today. But let me just ask Pietro if you could share a little bit about your experience in trying to get these vouchers to work for the people you work with, and tell us a little about what the Community Center Gigio does.
Sure. Thanks, Mark. As Mark mentioned, my name is Pietro Bartoli, and I'm a member of the Community Center Gigio. Before I get going, Mark, I just wanted to check. I just want to make sure I'm right on time. This is our just my time to speak, right? I can go ahead and share a little bit more, or
No, well, this is not
Or
yet
just a
your
comment.
formal time. This is time for you and others to talk about what issues we've discovered with vouchers. So it's just
Yeah,
that's
okay.
what we're talking about now. Yeah.
just so I'll be shorter then. Yeah, so Santa Egidio is a Catholic lay movement that was founded in Rome in 1968 and has been in the United States since the early 90s, and began its relationship with folks in the street about a dozen years ago. We are a group entirely made up of volunteers. Nobody is paid to be part of Santa Egidio. And the general operating principle is that nobody is too young, too old, too rich, too poor, too busy, too free to do something. Inspired by the parable of the Good Samaritan, we try to be neighbors to all those who are in need of a helping hand. Relevant for this conversation is as I said, the relationship with folks in the street that began about a dozen years ago, which began in the Midtown area just with a simple distribution of hot soup and sandwiches, and then has continued now for a few years since then, with a dedication to go every week. We haven't missed a week since then. Convinced that the way to do this is by building relationships and then being open to what it is that people ask of us. So as you can imagine, over these years, we've encountered more and more people, especially of late, who are going through the voucher process. And as volunteers, as friends of folks with vouchers, we've just been there accompanying them throughout the process in an informal and non-professional way. And what we have seen across the board is just a total ineffectiveness, basically, of the vouchers, unfortunately, for folks, especially who are coming directly from the streets, or from a long time for the streets, or who are chronically homeless. These are mostly the people who we see, given that our outreach is done on the sidewalks, in subways and that sort of thing. And these are folks who, for whatever reason, aren't as comfortable or aren't as capable independently of navigating on a largely online housing search in New York City. They're not used maybe to working with case managers much, and the case managers aren't as comfortable working with them. Landlords certainly aren't as receptive to them as they might be to other folks with vouchers. And just across the board, there are obstacles over and over and over again. And so what we have found is yeah, I said it already, an ineffectiveness of folks who are coming from the street or chronically homeless to work with vouchers, except for supportive housing. Supportive housing obviously is an enormously helpful part in reintegration of folks who are coming from the street and makes a lot of sense for many, many cases. The unfortunate part that we have run into in this kind of relationship is that many of the supportive housing units that are available that then take vouchers are run by the same social service agencies that provide the outreach on the streets and then the transitional housing settings, which leaves, just inherently is not a problem, but it leaves many people who are on the street and then going through that process with the impression that they are just being funneled from one place to another within the same organization, and kind of contributes to the impression that these organizations exist to make a paycheck off them. This is a very frequent impression of folks who are going through transitional housing and are trying to get off the streets. Whether or not it's true is another story, unfortunately, but it's certainly the impression that you get. And so there's a fracturing of the relationship, which makes a process that Adrian has already laid out in a best case scenario that is already difficult, even more complicated. So
Great.
Step after step after step, you find hurdles.
Thank you, Pietro. Let me just say, anyone who's not yet signed in in the chat, please give us your name and your organization so we keep track and get back to you as we continue this conversation. So let me now ask Chibuze, I think you're with us. Why don't you share a little bit about your organization and experience that you've had with your members who have been challenged and who have vouchers challenged and trying to get into housing?
Hi, everyone. My name is Chibuze Okorie. Came from the Church of Gethsemane, and I serve on the board of directors of New York State Council of Churches. I work with those coming home from prison. Affordable housing is out of reach of many of them who are returning home from prison. It's hard for them to get a voucher, and when they get a voucher, they have to come through the homelessness, and getting the voucher will expire on their hands, and they will not be able to access it. And some of them are being rejected by some landlords who always discriminate against them. So these are the problem I have to be able to help these my good friends who are coming home from prison. Many of them are elderly people. Some of them are extremely low income. Some of them are disabled and have no job. Even if they get the housing, their own 30% will be very difficult for them to pay. And because they can't afford it, they end up going homeless. And this contributes to the number of homelessness we have in our city today. The problem here is inability to access the housing and be able to succeed in getting through with the landlords who don't want to rent to anyone who's formerly incarcerated. Even if the voucher provides 75% for them, family members cannot afford to help them, for them to be able to get a job because of their records. So in the Church of Gethsemane, we try as much as we can to assist them to be able to get through with the voucher before the voucher expires in their hands. So this is the problem we have in now, and I would like to find resources where we can be able to help them to get housing. And secondly, waiting lists. Some of them come from prison and they have to wait for many months before they will be able to get through. When their own turn reach to issue them the voucher, then the voucher will expire. So this is the problem we have, and I would like to find if we get more resources to be able to help these individuals that are coming home from prison, you know. And homelessness make it very difficult for them to, you know, to search for housing and to be able to go to court if they are asked to come to court. You know, those who cannot pay their rent because they're homeless, they cannot access computers or have addresses where they can receive mails. So they end up being denied the opportunity to have affordable housing. So this is what I experience every day. And a lot of us, a lot of people in my church are trying to help, but they can't be able to help. Most of them commit another crime because they have nowhere to go and they're not settled, they go back to prison. So I would like to,
Yeah.
yes.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. James Addison is on his way in. He had an old email, so he'll be joining us in a minute. But while he's joining us, if you could just say a little bit more about the support that you provide to your members.
Yeah, the support we provide to them is to be able to, believe me honestly, housing is the most important thing there. We are the most difficult thing. I try as much as possible to get the family members. I even call for family members dinner where we can be able to discuss if any family member can be able to help their loved ones coming home from prison. And housing is the most important thing. And you got to have a job first. You got to get a job. There's stipulation. The parole wants them to have a job. If you don't have a job, how are you going to pay for your housing? Your own 30% is going to be difficult for you to make it up every month to the landlord. We have a support group whereby we try to have to offer them referral services, which sometimes work, which sometimes doesn't work because of their inability to have their own portion of rent. So Church of Gethsemane was founded as a church that helps those coming home from prison. And coming home from prison means a lot because there's no, some of them have no likelihood of support upon release. And how much more talking about housing when you don't have any kind of help when you come back home from prison. And a lot of them are facing, some of them have like lifetime parole and they cannot access anything. So those who have no education, who have no training, we go back now to start to see how they can be able to get GED. That takes a lot of time again for them to get the job they need that will help them to pay their own fair share of the housing.
Thank you, Chibuze. Okay, so James is on his way in, but let's move into the next part of the agenda. And Sarah, you've been resting your voice. I hope you're, oh, here's James. Oh, good. Hang on a second. Let me see if we can get James in quickly because I'd like to hear from James. I had an old address. Okay, James, you're coming in.
Recording in progress.
There we are. Very good. Okay, so I'd like to introduce James Addison, my old friend, a dear man. And James, here you are. Good. So James, sorry for the trouble with your email. I'm glad you could join us. So James is with a group called the Life Experience and Faith Sharing Associates. James and I have known each other for about 25 years. He's a wonderful man, and I'm so glad you could join us. So James, we've been hearing from Pietro about the community of San Egidio. We've been hearing from Chibuze about the community, the Church of the Gethsemane, about what the communities are and the support they provide. If you could tell us a little bit about LEFSA, that would be great.
Well, okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Hi, Peter. We met before. You came to one of our groups down in at St. Francis. I met Pedro once, I think, online. So hello, everybody. Anyway, I'm a team member of Life Experience and Faith Sharing Association. What we do, our main purpose is really we go into city shelters and drop-in centers all over the city, and we have what we call a street ministry, and we form homeless communities, people who are homeless, and we form communities and build community in the shelters and in our programs. We have a leadership study day, which we have once a month, and we were averaging maybe 150 formerly homeless and homeless people there. And there we try to look at more policy and look at just have different people who come there to do workshops. It's an empowerment model, and to just especially to make homeless people feel like they're special, and which they are, and just to make them feel at home. And so we try to have resources for them, whether it's to drug programs or whatever they might need. But we might refer them to some of the life skills program that Mark has run over 30 years now. So it's an empowerment model, and we've had plenty success over the years. Especially with we have a men's group that we have twice a month. We have a women's empowerment group we have twice a month. We have a creativity group where people can come and do creativity, which is just good for the spirit and for the soul. And in our groups, it's a faith-based model where people can share their life experience, share what's going on with them, share their issues, and then we try to get a scripture or something spiritual that relates to their life experience, and it's an empowerment model. And of course, I was in the shelters myself 30 years ago, and I went to Mark's program, and all of these different things helped me, and that's what we try to do with people. Mark he's been to almost all of our leadership study days, where he talks about policy and advocacy and different things like that. So, and we invite people from the bread line too, down on 31st Street, and a lot of them come from that line, and they come into our groups. And we've had people come to our groups that from years ago who are still with us, who we've met sleeping right on the streets right there. So that's a little bit, unless that's basically what we do.
Thanks, James. And I just want to say, I know James is coming in the middle, so he didn't hear the earlier conversation, but I just want to say that as James said, I've been supporting the community for about 25 years, and I've found it one of the most empowering experiences I've ever had. And so in terms of the support that people feel, just one example, we once had every monthly meeting has a theme. A few years ago, the theme was Mother's Day. We invited every single individual to take a moment, take a minute, and share the story of their mother or significant woman in their life. It took over an hour. It was so beautiful. Everyone was listened to. That's the community that James is part of. And I think that's the community that we know if there was a member of that community who had a voucher, that person would be supported. They would not be alone. They'd be in that apartment with a whole community behind them. So if an issue came up, that issue would be dealt with by the community. So that's what we're proposing to landlords, is that if we have someone from that community or from San Egidio or from the Church of the Gethsemane, we would like to know that the landlord is going to be willing to work with us and provide a place for that person who's connected with so many others.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And I think that's needed. And and we do work with people, we support people, and a lot of times people come with vouchers, and don't know what to do with them, or landlords that they have them. And so, some people we're successful with and some we're not, because landlords won't take them.
Thanks, James. And so now we're going to hear from Sarah Zwiderveen, who is the I forget what your title is. I have it listed on the agenda.
Just a housing advisor.
So she's the top. I have a friend who just became the second in the HPD, Housing Preservation Development, first deputy commissioner. And I said, I need the right person. And he said, Sarah's the right person. So
Mhm.
Sarah, thanks for joining us.
Sure,
So-
sure. Thank you, everybody. I'm happy to answer questions, but I guess if you want to just hear about it from our perspective in the city, how these vouchers work, we primarily are doing city FEPs and FEPs. And we really think about this at least I do, in three separate components, how to use these vouchers. So the first one is, really making sure that the apartment is safe. And so that means registering it, and there's a clearance check to make sure the owner is really the owner and that there's not lead or litigation. And that is submitted online. And then also there's a walkthrough in the apartment to make sure that's all okay. We do have a document that helps people prepare ahead of time. A lot of times partners just fail because they don't have that outlet that has the breaker on it in case you get water on it from the sink. There's little things like that are the cause of most of the failures of apartments. And so if we help landlords kind of prep ahead of time, make sure all the smoke detectors are there and make sure the child gates are in the windows the right way, that can really kind of smooth a lot of those walkthroughs and inspections and make sure those are okay. And then the second part is the landlord documents. Didn't used to be this way, but the IRS came down from on high and told us that we absolutely had to get landlord TIN information, because we have to report all of our rent to IRS, and we have to make sure that the landlord has signed the landlord documents that say, I understand what the program rules are, and this is who I want you to pay, and here's the address. So we got to get the landlord documents. And then we also have to get the tenant. Really what the tenant needs to do is get ready to apply for emergency assistance, because aside from the voucher, we're also asking the state for furniture allowance, a security voucher, an enhanced broker fee, and that first month's rent. So in order to do that, we have to do an emergency application for assistance, and people have to apply through the benefits centers, starting online or going to centers, to be able to get those benefits. And if they don't have any income, then we would pay a shelter allowance covering that person's contribution. So I was going to say that in response to the person who spoke before me. If somebody does not have any income to pay a contribution, as long as they work with their TANF case, their public assistance case, then we do that contribution and they don't have to pay. Or if they have income or they're working, then it's just this one-time application for those benefits. We issue the checks and then the person pays 30% of that income going forward. And those three things kind of all need to be aligned so we can make sure the apartment's safe, make sure we have the correct information on the landlord when we're issuing all these checks, and that the tenant has applied for this assistance so that we can issue those checks and move all that together so the person can move out. And then, after the people move, we certainly, HRA does have a really massive program that we call the one-shot program. It's emergency arrears. And we do issue those arrears to over 50,000 people a year. It's really a wide program, and that landlords should know that, if somebody does fall behind, they can apply for a one-shot, and as long as you have a voucher, HRA considers that you have future ability to pay, and those arrears can be covered. So it's really, there isn't anywhere else in the country that has we do complain that we do want the state to fund more things and more vouchers and things, but this arrears program that the state funds along with the city is really the biggest one in the country. And so that does help provide a lot of security to landlords once people have moved in. And yeah, I guess I can just answer any other questions
Yeah,
that you have. I know we're a little bit behind.
That's great. No, that's great, Sarah. And let's now, and I want to invite Adrian and Chibuze and James and Pietro particularly, and also our friends from Belmont Arthur, to have a conversation about looking at what the issues might be and how we might resolve them. So maybe we can start with our friends at Belmont Arthur, since you've been doing this, and we don't have a lot of landlords with us, but we're so happy you're with us. I think there may be a few others. If anybody else is a landlord or manages buildings, could you just raise your hand? I see Neil. Any other landlords with us today? Okay, so let's start with our friends from Belmont Arthur. So please join the conversation with Sarah and with James and Chibuze, and you can raise your hand if you want to ask a question, or I can just leave it to people being polite. So yeah, why don't you raise your hand if you want to start the question for
Okay,
Sarah?
my name is
Yeah, go ahead.
listed as Consolado Chichu, but everybody knows me as Joe. So in case
Okay.
you want to refer to me, you can call me Joe. It's
Thanks,
a little
Joe.
bit easier. Adrian, how are you? I know that we had a conversation earlier today. We're working with New Destiny. Adrian,
Hi.
how we doing? For a couple of years now, and it's been a successful involvement. But I want to be the devil's advocate right now.
Good.
There aren't too many landlords, or maybe I'm the only one, and I happen to be a not-for-profit landlord. But I know a lot of landlords, and I don't know why some of my not-for-profit colleagues aren't part of this conversation, or maybe they don't know about it, whatever the case may be. But I'm going to tell you the pluses and the minuses of this thing. And I know that everybody is just talking about, and aptly so, the availability of apartments and landlords to join up and to get the bonus and the broker's fee, whatever the case is, and as long as the apartment passes HQS inspection, very simple. And if that was the only real problem, having people participate, forget about the delays, and sometimes you have paperwork gets lost and that happens, whatever. Landlords would probably be just jumping and just working out and ironing out those particular problems because they're really manageable problems. But then we have the social problem. I don't have the problem with Adrian and New Destiny and the clients that she's sending me, but I'm hearing people speak about homelessness and the problems that they have, be they formerly incarcerated or dependent, have what do you call dependency on alcohol or drugs, or have mental illness. You have to understand something, folks. And I come from a social service background, not-for-profit. I have over 350 of my units where I deal with other what do you call not-for-profits, the Bridge, Housing and Services, Odyssey House, et cetera, that provide under their master lease units for either individuals or families in my buildings. Many work out well. A number don't work out so well. And that's where the rub is. It's under the surface. People don't want to speak about it, but I think we have to speak about this honestly if we want to make these programs really, really work. I'm a believer, and I'm willing to take the shots, and I've been taking shots where people don't pay the rent. People damage the apartment. There's hoarding in the apartment. Then fire hazards occur. HPD inspectors cite me and not the tenant for the conditions that exist. We understand, we go with the flow, but you have to understand a lot of landlords, and it's not a question of does the dollars work. They have people, all of my families are minorities, basically Black and Hispanic, some on fixed income, some on working income, some with Section 8, some with my rents are affordable, have tax credit buildings. I have an obligation to make sure that they live decently and safely. And I believe everybody needs a first shot, even a second shot at housing. But they have to have the necessary services to stabilize them, not for 30 days. And if they call us, we'll come and we'll respond to them if they have what we call a housing need. I need somebody to make sure they pay their part of the rent. I need to make sure that people are maintaining the apartment in a clean and sanitary way. If they're not taking their medication, that somebody would be proactive to make sure that the people are doing it and don't become a danger to themselves or to others in the building. Now, I don't want to say it's a plague, but this is a business where people either make or lose money depending on who they put in a building. I'm already dealing with the situation with And I don't want to get into a super political conversation about stop and frisk and clean halls where I have decent people in certain buildings that are asking for transfers because the conditions outside their buildings or in their hallways are becoming untenable because the police can't exercise what they used to do in the past. I'm not saying I'm for it again. I'm just saying we have a problem of perception and reality that some people can't even live in an affordable apartment on a particular street because of certain conditions. It's not just a question in this conversation of are there willing landlords who are willing to accept the voucher and follow the protocols of making sure the apartment is decent? Are the people receiving the necessary service? Not everybody that Adrian has sent me is going to be that perfect person that's just down on their luck in a domestic violence situation, keeps a clean apartment, is just worried about themselves and their children to have a decent school and a safe place to navigate from work to school, whatever. Other people have other issues. I know I'm giving you a political manifesto over here, but I just want to open up the discussion to the variety of issues that what do you call, oops, I did it, touch, Rolando. Okay, I touched something, I lost half the screen here. I hope that gives you my perspective on it. I know I'm wide ranging on this thing, but I wanted to open up the field to a larger discussion.
It's very, very helpful, Joe. And that's exactly why we're here, because we are believing, and it's great that you're with us, because we believe that other landlords would be willing to accept tenants if they knew that the support was there. What we're proposing is that working with San Egidio, working with LEFSA, working with the community, with the congregation of the Church of the Gethsemane, we can ensure that the support would be there. And then we need to find landlords like you who are willing to take a shot and willing to work with people who are supported by communities. So I don't know if Pietro, I think you had your hand up, if Pietro or James or Chibuze, but maybe then we can go into the conversation of how do we find those landlords and convince them. What do they need? What do we need to show them to let them know that these people will not be coming alone, they'll be coming with support?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Pietro, you wanted to say something?
Thanks, Mark. Yeah.
Yeah.
What I wanted to say was that, and I'm sorry not to pick up entirely on Joe's commenting because it's worthwhile, and I wish I had more to say in direct. But we're too small of an organization. We're not housing providers ourselves, just accompaniers. And I think I hear you loud and clear, and you're right, and to point out the concerns of many landlords. What I wanted to bring up was that in our experience, in fact, the issues of paperwork and getting someone onboarded and actually getting them into an apartment, yes, those exist too. We are really faced with a serious issue of even getting an interview, an application in, of even getting a person with a voucher who tries to go see an apartment as an individual being rejected, that just out of hand. Source of income discrimination is really pervasive, unfortunately. And again, as Joe points out, there are reasons as well. But as a company or as a support network, we are really at a loss because there's not the space to have a conversation with a landlord to say, oh, okay, these are your concerns. Well, what would work to assuage them? It just doesn't happen. And it doesn't seem to me that at least the ones I've experienced, and I don't want to paint with too broad of a brush here, but the social service providers that I've encountered that are working with folks coming off the street, the general outreach organizations, don't have the capacity or the knowledge or the know-how to work with individual landlords, private landlords, small landlords. They just don't have those relationships for a number of reasons. Either they have too high of turnover, or they have too high a caseload, and so they can't spend enough time actually following each person. Whatever the reason is, they don't know. And so people are left to fend for themselves with these vouchers that are difficult to navigate from the landlord's perspective and the client's perspective. And as we heard, they just tend to expire and then they're stuck. Obviously, there are cases where it works out, especially in specific conditions, right, where the person has more tailored support and that organization has a more tailored relationship with landlords, then it might work. But if a person is kind of thrown to the wolves, so to speak, or just part of the private market, as many of the city vouchers are at least, designed seemingly to be, I haven't seen it work, unfortunately.
Adrian and then Drew, and then we want to, but I just want to say, Joe, that you've presented us with a wonderful challenge, and I'm hoping that going forward, we can talk to you about strategies to find some of your fellow landlords and let them know that we want to indeed provide that support. Peter had in the chat, what's the mechanism for providing support? We know that these three agencies do provide support. And so if we can go to landlords and say, we've got some people who have a backup, can you go to bat with us? Can you open up a few units for us? And then we can learn, as you have, that when things can work. But Adrian, why don't you go, and then Drew, and then go ahead, Adrian. You're
I'll
muted.
just say really quickly, like
Yeah.
there is no one size fits all approach to this. Not everyone that has the voucher is going to, landslide into permanent housing. Maybe you discover during the life of that search that they need supportive services. They need to be in supportive housing, or they may need to move into a different type of housing that can accommodate whatever issues arise during that housing search. I think the approach is off. And like Joe is saying, there's a lot of reasons why the owners don't want to take Section 8 that sometimes doesn't come to the forefront because it's just not right to say out loud. But we in particular know that in order to support clients, there needs to be a stronger social service net. And that's what we have been trying to do. That's where the money should go. We should be preparing the clients to be independent, be emotionally stable, to provide for themselves. If we can't do that, then how can we ensure that they'll be able to handle an apartment on their own? If they're not able to do that, then obviously the cycle repeats itself. You have clients setting the example for other clients who have good intentions, have great intentions, but things happen in people's lives, and it could impact your quality as a tenant. So I do agree that both can be true. One, we don't want discriminatory practices, and two, we need social services set up so that we can prevent clients falling into that loop where they can't help themselves. And again, owners are back around the bend and creating and using those clients as examples not to rent to others. So yeah, and that is part of the resource navigation services that we offer at New Destiny. That's the reason why we offer that. But if other nonprofits could provide something like that, if everyone in a perfect world were thinking that way, we would see less of those issues that occur.
Great. Drew, and then I wanted to ask Sarah if she wanted to respond. And I know, Peter, you had your hand up as well, but Drew, why don't you go, and then Sarah, if you have something to say, and then Peter.
So I wanted to first of all thank Joe for airing some issues. Hearing from the landlord side is super important because we don't know how to fix the problems unless we're openly talking about them. As a couple of people said, like when we were doing work on this project, we dealt with a lot of landlords, and some of them were open to it, and many were evasive on why they didn't want to, and some were a little more blunt. And we did hear some of the issues that Joe was talking about. So I think that there is a real issue with a lack of social service support as people move into housing. And part of where we wound up coming to this kind of conversation was seeing how much of a lack of support there was and how much that affected landlords, and also seeing how many organizations are out there that provide this kind of support, but they're not all interconnected. So part of our hope as the interfaith landlord, the interfaith voucher support services is to try to create a network through you guys and through other work we'll be doing to let all these groups kind of connect and work ourselves kind of between them to connect the support services to the tenants so the landlords are comfortable. And we're trying to build those conversations and those networks, and we're continuing to work on that for a lot of organizations that specifically support specific populations, as Joe was kind of referring to, with varying issues, whether that simply be being elderly, having a disability, being of the LGBTQ population, having a mental health condition. But also, as Joe mentioned, those issues come up and they can be a problem, but there's also those same issues in the general population. You're always rolling the dice to some degree that any tenant could have an issue. So if we can put the right support in place, I think it's actually a little bit of a better bet. And I just wanted to throw out, since we're talking about a bunch of things, and while this effort is sprung from a faith-based source, you or the provider of housing doesn't need to be a faith-based person or organization to be involved. Most of the point of this meeting is simply to get that conversation going between landlords, tenants, faith-based and social service organizations with city services, and find a way to kind of start finding the ways to plug those holes and gaps. And I would hope that Joe or anyone else who has some concerns, either we can hear them now or you can follow up with us, because we're really interested in finding out what the perspectives are about what we need to fix to make it all work.
Wanted to ask Sarah if she had anything to say, but also let me mention that anyone who has any questions, we have a new email address we just created because Drew's contract ends in the end of the month. We're going to see if we can find a way to continue with him, because we would miss him if he wasn't with us. At this point, we don't know, but anyone can write to Vouchers, VOUCHERS @IAHH.org, and we will respond to that. But again, as Drew said, this is the beginning of a conversation that we hope will continue, and we're so happy to have Adrian and everyone here as partners, because as we know, this hasn't yet been figured out, and we need to figure it out because there are 20,000 people with vouchers who are depending on it, and many of them would be good tenants with the right support. So Peter, with that, why don't you please?
Sorry, wait,
Yeah, Sarah. Oh,
can
yeah,
I just
sorry.
say, I do want to challenge a little bit the notion that everyone that has a voucher needs some social services. I mean, and the inverse, which is that people with vouchers have no problems. I mean, I certainly, a lot of the problems described, I've seen in my buildings in New York City with people who don't have vouchers. So it's a little like, let's not say that it's just this group. And I think it's like fewer than 2% of people come back to shelter when they have a voucher, that first year, and just very few the second and third years. So it is a very stable experience for most people. We do have the home-based program when people want to reach out and they have issues. We can't really mandate services for folks, so we do have that they can ask their home base. We know that everybody knows home base is pretty busy right now with catching up after the eviction moratorium, and so we do appreciate organizations such as yours and your groups really helping also when tenants that are having any kind of social service issues that they need help with.
Hey, Mark, can I get a couple of minutes? I wasn't sure how to raise the hand, but can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, terrific. I am a broker here in New York City, and I started to do a lot of Section 8 rentals in the summer. And it has been very, very labor intense for a number of reasons. The process is what the process is, and it takes a long time to close deals. I am average anywhere from 104 days to 130 days from the moment that we drop an application to when we actually get the person to move in. I don't know that could be changed or not. That's not even the issue. The biggest issue that I have confronted as a broker is that I put in the applications, the landlord then sets aside the apartment for this particular applicant, and it's going to take about maybe 60 days before we get a response from NYCHA to say, okay, you are approved or not, and then we can move forward. And we have had, currently, I have 4 different applications that have been approved by the landlord and by NYCHA. And by the time we get ready to have these people move in, NYCHA comes back to say, you know what? That $2,500 rent that you're asking for, we're going to offer you $2,200. And then the landlords basically said, I'm sorry, the market is a very active market. There is no need for the landlords to reduce their rent. So these people who have been in shelters waiting to get out of there, and we are at the portal to get them into a nice apartment, and they can't move in. They're all in limbo right now. How do we fix that? Who can we call to discuss this at NYCHA? And the reason why I'm bringing it up is because we are very, very strict about adhering to the guidelines that have been provided for the emergency vouchers. We know how much you're going to be able to pay for a particular voucher. We know that if the apartment doesn't include the electricity and the gas, we need to minus that out. So as a broker, I only present those applications that meet the criteria. So if they meet the criteria based on the information that is provided to us, why are they nickel and diming the landlords?
Julian, thank you. Let me say that I think this is a great conversation. I'm so glad everybody's able to join us. We said we would finish at 5:15, but we'd go longer if we need to. So if anyone needs to leave at 5:15, thank you for joining us. Hopefully people can stay until 5:30. We can resolve some more of these questions. But again, we will have information for anybody who attended. We will send you follow-up. And we will also continue the conversation to see if we can drill down on some of these questions and come and resolve some of them. But again, if anyone wants to stay in touch with us, I just shared the email in the chat. It's vouchers with a plural, vouchers at iahh.org. And again, we're going to continue for another few minutes. Sarah, if you wanted to respond to Julian's question,
Yeah,
and
I
then
mean,
Peter and Patrick. Yeah.
NYCHA is required by HUD to do a rent reasonableness assessment. It's not anything any of us love to do, but it is HUD requires, and the way that they do it is they go into a website called affordablehousing.com that has tens and tens of thousands of apartments from all over the city. They look in the area where the apartment is and try to get a good range of apartments that are comparable. And they should also then have a process, though, if they come back and say the rent needs to be $200 lower, they should also say, but if you can submit other comparables to us that are exactly the same, that are getting this rent right in, within a quarter mile of that apartment, then you can do that and try to debate that rent with them. But it is a HUD requirement.
Yeah, Sarah, here is one of the interesting things. In the same building, one studio gets approved and the other one, they're asking for a $200 reduction. It just doesn't make any sense. It's the same building. So it seems to me as if someone who is not experienced or knowledgeable enough about the marketplace is making these decisions, which are to some extent capricious.
So let me just say this in defense of Sarah, not to defend her, but we know that HPD is or DSS are all understaffed and overwhelmed. But I'm going to ask Sarah if we could reach out to you, or if you can give us someone else who might be able to drill down on some of these issues rather than have you face the firing line with all these questions right now.
Well, yeah, we
the
can.
system is not,
I
is
would
not
be-
perfect.
I can ask.
I would be more than
NYCHA
happy
about the
to-
individual apartment. Yeah, if you.
Yes,
You
Sarah,
can,
I
okay,
would be
so
more
then-
than happy to talk to you one-on-one and
Great.
understand. I need to understand it a little better.
I mean, yeah, I can refer you. I can ask them. They are
Okay,
control.
great.
They are in control of that process.
Thank you. Okay, so Drew wanted to have an announcement to remind us of where certain people go, certain landlords. So Drew, you want to do a 2-minute
Yeah, absolutely.
announcement?
So before getting specifically into that, just for 1 second, I wanted to just again say that part of our goal is to create this network of organizations. So I hope many of you will stay in touch in one capacity or another. And that we're at the moment looking at different groups that we can try to find. And I agree with Sarah, not everyone on a voucher needs support by any measure, but everyone in the world could use a little extra support. So we're not mandating anything, but we're suggesting that if possible, we give support to anyone who's interested in it, and that by that support, they'll become a stronger tenant and making landlords more comfortable. And a lot of those groups of people that we're looking at fall into certain populations or issues. If you have suggestions of other issues we should look at or organizations we should reach out to, please do reach out to us. We're happy to expand our network. And that would include people who have a disability, those who happen to be elderly, dealing with HIV/AIDS, intimate partner violence, fall into the LGBTQ+ population, have a mental health condition, are going through reentry after incarceration, are a refugee trying to find shelter, are dealing with substance abuse, or are a veteran. So again, if you have suggestions on groups we should reach out to or populations we aren't considering, please do let us know. And if you are a landlord or a broker or know of one who has a unit of 5, covers 5 units or less, then we'd like to refer you to the EHV program with Adrian, who we already dropped her information in the chat, but I will do it again.
So any building of 5 units or less will go to Adrian and New Destiny.
And then
yeah.
for those who are looking to deal with landlords who have 6 units or more, we'd like you to reach out to us. And again, we will be referring some of those back to New Destiny, but possibly some of those to other partners as well. And you can reach out to us directly. And that's, again, our information in the chat. And it doesn't need to be for just talking about that. If you want to continue this conversation, I would love to hear from you guys. And again, I would happily hope that anyone on this group could also connect. We're not just trying to make it all go through us, but just creating a community conversation.
Right. So Peter, you had something to say. Sorry, I've been holding you up. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, this is really helpful. So if I could say what I hear are two themes here. One is that there's a question around support for a certain subsection of voucher holders, and we need to find out a good mechanism for landlords to call to help those individuals get the support they need. And then secondly, where do landlords go, to work through these issues around holding the apartment and availability and these kind of mechanisms that sound like it gets pretty frustrating. So those two things. And then I would like to hear from Shanette about her experience as a voucher holder.
So let's go to Patrick and then briefly Pietro, and then we'll hear from Jeanette, who we just met yesterday, who has direct experience with some real challenges. So Patrick, you want to go, and then let's make it fast, and we'll hear from, we want to finish in 10 minutes. So go ahead, Patrick, welcome.
Well, how you doing? My name is Mr. Austin. Everybody in the world knows Parish. But this the situation is, I was living in a particular shelter, and I got attacked by my roommate. So while I was attacked from my roommate, I went to the hospital. I'm in a rehabilitation center right now, and they're telling me because my voucher ran out while I was in the shelter system, that I would have to go back to the shelter system again to get it renewed, which makes absolutely no sense.
No sense.
I'm literally in a wheelchair right now, and someone had found an apartment for me, but because of the voucher that I had ran out, I wasn't able to get it.
So Patrick, what I want to suggest you do is write to us with your information. We will then connect you with Sarah or someone she can put us in touch with and see if we can work this through. Because obviously you have a voucher, you shouldn't lose because you got attacked. I mean, that's unacceptable.
And then furthermore, before this, Mr. Terrell Muhammad told me about y'all. I was also one of the individuals out here attending a lot of events because you came home from prison, because we was talking about income discrimination. And before I got hurt, I also went to a couple of these landlords, and I had landlords tell me straight up, listen, I'm not saying you, but the majority of people that got these vouchers is not people that we want in our buildings. Because, so therefore, they may not say it to everybody, but this exists. So we have to make incentives for these people. Because a couple people even said the city voucher, for instance, they said that voucher, a lot of them think of that as worthless. Because they, the Mercedes-Benz of all vouchers is Section 8 one.
Right.
So y'all have my contact information, and if you want, you can give me yours, and I'll make sure we can get to. You got my phone number, don't y'all?
Well, put it in the chat. Actually, write to us at vouchers@iahh.org and give us your information.
Patrick, Mark, let me just make it easier. Patrick, just give me your phone number. I'll make sure we reach out to you.
Okay.
929-361-6018.
All right, no problem.
If you want my email, I'll give you that too.
I'll call you and we'll get the rest from there. No problem.
Great.
All right. So you got 929-361. Thank you.
So, thank you for joining us, and we're going to see if we can work this. There are people who can help you with this, and hoping that we can connect you with those people through Sarah. So Giovanni, quickly, and then we want to hear from Shanette. Giovanni, you have your hand up. You wanted to speak? Okay, so why don't we go to Shanette? Shanette, thank you for joining us. Welcome.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, hi. My name is Shanette Van Dyke. I'm not speaking on behalf of my job, but I am a New York State Court officer here on Staten Island. My sister had a stroke last year, Halloween, long story short, she's totally disabled. She can't talk or anything like that. She's learning how to walk, talk, everything all over again. She had a city FEPS voucher. That being said, I had to get guardianship of her and her 2 children. Her daughter just turned 4. Her son is 15. Dealing with Canva. Now, like I said, I had guardianship of her. I don't know if it was a lack of judgment between the agency and my judge, but long story short, I was still looking for the apartment for her. She's now almost ready for discharge. Her voucher, her case has expired. Her voucher expired in September. Her city FEPS voucher at that time was $22.17. I was told that the new city FEPS voucher had went up in June to $25.27. They would not give me the new city FEPS voucher amount, so that I was not able to secure her a new, the new apartment under the new city FEPS voucher amount, which now it is expired. So there were conversations back and forth. I had to make a complaint to Brooklyn, which, I'm not trying to get anyone in trouble. That being said, I don't think I felt that I had to tell anyone who I worked for in order for me to get help. With that being said, her next appointment to be re-interviewed will be January 23rd, which she can come home now. But she has no place to go now. I mean, she has her old apartment, which is only a 1-bedroom, but she will be coming home with medical equipment, which I was just told that I will have to put in for a medical accommodation. But that being said, I worked closely with Canva and Family Justice Center on Staten Island, which is domestic violence. And I am sending people to these agencies thinking that they are helping these people, but they are coming back to me at work stating that they are not getting help. And their children are winding up at these family shelters, not knowing that I'm not really helping them. So being that I'm experiencing this for myself now on an unrelated issue, being that my sister's disabled, what can I do to help? Now I'm asking, being that it's happened to me, what can I do to help? Because it's very uncomfortable and it's very sad that I'm thinking that I'm helping these people that really they're coming to a state agency, a state court for help, and I can't help them. And I can't even help my sister. I can't even help myself. So what do I do?
Well, so I want to the same answer that I gave to our friend earlier. We're hoping that Sarah can help us sort through this a little bit. So if you can leave your number in the chat or give it to us, and Drew will take it. We'll be back in touch with you. Actually, I think we have it because you and I and Peter talked yesterday. And let's see if we can give Sarah a little more work, even though she's not feeling
Miss Sarah.
well.
Sarah, she we were talking behind scenes, and I think it was Miss Adrian.
Andrea Reed is also on, yeah.
Miss Best, right. There was another thing that the way you explained everything, the only thing that I have with all the agencies that are all together, there has to be like a central data bank where everybody can be able to look in and see, because it's taken entirely too long.
Yeah.
Especially it's freezing outside. It's taken entirely too long for the people that need help for housing and things like that to get the help that they need. It shouldn't take 2 months.
Yeah. Well, let me say this,
For
Jeanette.
someone-
In this group, the Homes Can't Wait effort, we've been trying to get the HRA to come up with a visible database where we can track people. They haven't done it yet. Look, as Sarah said, there's a lot of work. They're understaffed. They're working on it. I trust that people are trying to do it. It's not easy. I think we just have to keep pressing them in a way that's supportive. And also part of it is just to get political for a second, we want to be sure the funding is there for the staff they need. The mayor's now looking to cut staff. We can't ask Sarah about her position on that, but the fact is they need people to do the work. They're doing a lot of work. They need people. So let's keep pushing that.
Is it the fact that we don't have the money to hire more people, or maybe some of the people that are doing the work need to be rotated?
Well, that's another conversation. But
yeah, there's also just a massive resignation across all programs, and everybody is having a terrible time finding new staff. So nonprofits and government.
Yeah.
Well,
and to
but
just
if they don't know
echo-
that you're hiring, how are they supposed to help? I know there's a lot of people that's looking for work that are qualified, but they don't know that anyone's hiring.
Well, that's another question, I think. So I want to say, we're going to be meeting until 6 o'clock, but anyone who doesn't want to be embarrassed to leave, early, feel free to leave at 5:30, but we prefer everyone stay. And let me just say, most people are still here, which is terrific. I just want to tell everybody, we appreciate your staying with us. I know a few people had to leave, but Drew, you had something to say, and then we can continue the conversation. And as long as people can stay. And Sarah, thank you. Drew, thank you for hanging in there. So Sarah has to pick up her kid in a little while. We all
Good.
have lives.
Thank you, Miss Sarah.
Wait,
Yeah.
Mark, let's just, before Sarah goes, I want to give her a chance to respond to both what Patrick and Jeanette said.
Sure.
She'd be willing. Sarah?
We put you on the spot here about answering semi-political questions.
We're already talking to Jeanette about her. It's really, on Jeanette's case, it is never in history have we stopped housing court for 2 years. And so there just is thousands and thousands and thousands of people all trying to get into home base all at the same time. And that is really a lot of the challenge. They're all down 20 or more % staff. And so I know on everyone's individual experience, it's really hard and frustrating, and we sympathize and we try to work on all these cases as they come, but it is really I have almost 20 years, and it's really the worst I've ever seen right now in terms of that. And Mr. Austin's case, well, if we can just get his information and we can talk between DHS and HRA and try to see.
Just real fast before you leave, and this is the last thing I'm gonna say. I know, go get your baby because I know how it is. But you have staff that doesn't want to work. I'm just telling you how it is, because there was 2 specific people that kept passing the buck. They just kept passing the buck between each other, and I'll send you the names. I'll send you the emails. But it's 2 specific people in the Staten Island division. I don't know where Mr. Austin's at. But it's certain people that they just don't want to do. Oh, my supervisor's not here. They're on vacation. Meanwhile, you can do the work. You can do the work, and it could have been prevented about what happened. I'm pretty sure in his case and in my case. So I'm just telling you. But go ahead, go get the baby. Thank you for listening. I'll be in contact with you. Have a great night and get home safe.
And Sarah, thank you. And I just want to say one other thing. We know that it's been a very difficult time through COVID, and many people have even who are working at the city have felt frustrated. So I think part of the job that we have as people of faith and as citizens is to encourage our elected officials and our city workers to do a good job, and to tell them we're on your side, we're rooting for you. Sometimes they try very hard and they get criticized. It's very difficult to do a good work when you're doing your best and people are beating you up for not doing more. So I just think let's try to be encouraging and caring for each other. We're all trying very hard. People are human. Sometimes
You're right. No, you're right. You're absolutely correct. And I'm not saying that is. You got to remember, I'm a court officer. They're in my face. In my face every day.
Thank you.
So,
Sarah, thank you
Sarah,
so
do you
much.
have
We'll be in touch with you. You've been great. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very, very much, Sarah.
And for your
Sarah,
service.
Sarah, were you able to finish what you wanted to say?
Yeah, I think so. Andrea, you had something to say?
Oh, no, I was just going to share that I have Miss Van Dyke's information, and we will follow up tomorrow to help her with a path forward, and the other gentleman as well when it gets to my desk. So we'll make
Andrea,
sure we
introduce
figure out
yourself.
what's happening.
You're with HRA
I'm
or
sorry.
DSS? Yeah.
Andrea Reed, I'm the Deputy Commissioner here for Prevention Housing Assistance. I work very close with Sarah, and so I will help to figure out what's happening and a path forward. So.
That's great.
Okay,
So glad you're with us.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
And
No
so
problem.
we have your information as well. Drew, you've got.
Oh, that's Miss Reed.
Great.
I have
That's
it.
Miss Reed.
Miss Reed, I think I'm almost certain that you had helped me before.
I did.
Okay.
Great.
Yes.
Okay,
All
so
right.
the floor is open to
I just want
conversation.
I just want to add up something. I work with those coming home from prison, and formerly incarcerated folks, mostly rejected. I will continue to say that by the landlords, who don't have anything, who don't want to deal with them because of their record. I think we should have to work towards this housing should be a
Yes.
privilege, you know, and human rights.
Yeah.
Should also be available to everyone. I don't believe that everybody who comes home from prison continue to be a bad person. In my church, we believe that people can change. So people should be given access to affordable housing, regardless of who you are. Regardless of who you are.
Not to interrupt. Eric Adams just, I do not agree with him. He just took money away from the library system. So now our brothers and sisters coming home from being incarcerated, they have less of a chance to even use the library to go online to apply for any jobs because they don't have access to online anymore once they leave jail. So not even only that, New York City Housing, to my knowledge, still does not take anyone that has a felony, if I'm correct. If you have a felony, you cannot live in New York City Housing. So now they have no other choice but to get a voucher and try to live in a private house.
Yeah.
With a landlord that takes a voucher. So, which I do help on my own because I have Project Hospitality that is right by my job. So I have a lot of brothers and sisters that are coming home in my community that are also stuck that way. That unless they get a voucher, they're right back on the street, which they wind up doing something crazy to go back to jail because that's the only place they can go, especially now to keep warm. So
I agree. Let me say that. Yeah, let me say that what we've learned today, as Peter was saying, is a few things. But one, that we need to find more landlords willing to give us a shot, to trust that we're going to give them people who have support, and we'll go back to our landlord friend who joined us to ask him to help develop a strategy to find others of his colleagues. And there are others who we have on our list who we have to reach out to, because that's really what's going to take. As long as people in public housing are not allowed to have records, or not allowed to be coming out of prison, we have to find private landlords who are willing to work with us. And that's really going to be our next step, to find those landlords and to demonstrate that we have support for the people who are getting housed.
Mark,
yeah.
Can I just say something? What if there is like a clause in the language when someone is renting to help the landlord secure, like with the voucher? Like, I know there's a lot of people, I'm not gonna say a lot, I know there's a majority of people that in their mind they're already saying, okay, I'm gonna stay the 30 days. I'll pay the rent for the first 2 months. And then after the first 2 months, I'm not gonna pay the rent anymore. There has to be somewhere.
With a voucher, their rent is paid for. And
No, but not all the time, because my sister had the working in the beginning. She had the working city FEPS, so majority of the rent was paid.
Yeah, but
she still had to pay a certain percentage of it.
Sure.
Which it's not going to cover the landlord's entire mortgage. So he or she would still have to come up with that amount.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying? Which is not fair to the landlord. So why would I want to rent to somebody that has any voucher if it's not totally covering it? Which I do agree, because that's what we're seeing now, being that that it's not covered. Now that they're able to evict now.
Well, you would think that if someone has a stable apartment and they have the income to pay their portion of the rent, if they decided not to, ultimately that's a pretty foolish decision, because ultimately they'll be getting kicked out, right? So part of that is
that's
support.
what I'm telling you. I'm seeing.
Yeah.
That's what I'm telling you that I'm seeing.
Right.
Being that I'm back to work, and we're getting landlord tenant paces back in. That there's people that owe $16,000, $20,000, $30,000 in renting their vouchers, and they're doing the ERAP program, and they're doing what's the other program they're doing, one-time deals and all that other stuff. But during that whole time, but during that whole time, the landlord is not. No one's helping the landlord. So why, after everything is said and done, why would I want to rent again to somebody that has a voucher? Is what I'm saying.
Sure. Well, these are more complicated questions, but which need to be addressed. We can't address that today, but I think it's important.
No. I know it's just something that maybe we need to bring up to legislature.
Yeah.
And also, it has to go both ways, because there's also landlords that are just in it for the money and they don't care about the tenant.
Okay.
Now I know people that's like that too. I'm
Yeah,
one of them.
let's
Mark?
put that question on the shelf and cover it another
Mark?
time.
Could I,
Peter, go ahead.
I suggest, I'd like to offer a couple summarizing comments so we can conclude this.
Sure, go ahead.
Just based on what I've heard. So first of all, I think we should do another seminar where we can come back with this material to get more clarification in questions, and I hope that you'll consider that. Number two is please call the contact us at the voucher email and let us try to help you get connected with the right people. Number three, I do hear that Sarah and I see the other woman, was it Ms. Reed? Is that right?
It's Miss Reed, and there is also Miss
Ms. Reed.
Yeah, Ms.
Yes.
Reed. Thank you,
Yeah.
Commissioner Reed.
Hi, Miss Gloria.
And also from New Destiny as
Adrian.
well.
Adrian.
Yeah, Miss
Those would
Adrian.
be,
And Miss
Yeah.
Adrian. There
I
she
think
goes.
those would be really good conversation partners about troubleshooting, a few of these things. If we could, take that conversation offline. Number three is I do think that we have some support groups here we've identified in terms of voucher holders. But what we can do is start to think a little bit more about how to address some of these anxieties that I heard Belmont express about some voucher holders, and see if there's some better mechanism to address that concern. And
Yeah, especially with Mr. O'Corey too.
yeah, well, I'm including Chibouze and St. Orgigio and also Lefsa in that, in that group. And then if we could do that, try to come back together, and then again, if we'll try to put out some information so that you can clearly advocate if there are policy or legal changes or budgetary needs or staffing issues that we can all advocate for, that we kind of lay that out there.
And the one thing, let me just say, we did not mention, but we'll send to everyone who attended information about advocating for the state housing voucher. We didn't get to that, but that's clearly an important issue that we all want to get behind.
Exactly. And again, we have an advocacy day in the end of February, which will focus on passage of a housing access voucher program at the state level. But we publish seminars on our website, New York State Council of Churches website. And I have your emails where you can see this, and that website will include the recording of this seminar that you can refer back to.
Yeah. Thank you, Peter. So Patrick, did you have another question, and anyone for any final comments before we close?
First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for the information that y'all shared. It's very useful. But one thing, I'm one of them individuals who came home from the prison system, right? I was doing 32 long years. See, a lot of people don't understand that when you do apply for like public housing or the thing like that, there's certain criteria that actually move in our favor. If you've been out here more than a year, if your sentence was over, the conviction was over 10 years ago, but a lot of people automatically think that you're barred or there's certain things that works in our favor, but a lot of people don't know this law. So therefore, it's our job to sit there and educate. You know what I'm saying? And this way other people can know, because no one can tell our story better than we can.
Right.
And like I said, I'm in Manhattan. I'm a firm believer in that. It's an old saying that adversity caused some men to break, but it also caused people to break records. Let's be the kind of break the records. Anyway, I can be some assistance. Let me know.
Sounds good.
Mr. Austin, can I have your number again? Can I have your number, please?
It's 929 361
Mm-hmm.
6018. You probably,
Okay,
you
and
probably I'm surprised some of your might, Mr. Terrell, you look back some of them news. I was some of them people out there in front of the city hall before when we had the vaccine mandates like that. Yeah, I was out, you know, with going
Yeah,
against
you
gun
do
violence.
familiar.
Yeah, I was one of them individuals out there helping the people. So anyway, I can be some assistance. Let me know.
Great.
Cause I got a friend
I'm
right
gonna
now.
text you.
Huh?
I'm gonna text you. My name is Sharnette Van Dyke. I'm gonna text you because, like I said, I transferred from Manhattan courts from over there. I'm on Staten Island now.
Yes.
I didn't know that. Like I was still under the impression that New York City Transit, New York City Housing didn't allow felons to, rent apartments. So I'm gonna call you. I'll call you when everything's over.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, no
Andrea,
doubt.
if I could ask just for clarification, I believe it's up to each housing project to decide their policy with regard to providing apartments for felons. Is that the case?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not blanket across the board.
Right. Okay, good.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
And
Right.
also when you do like the housing lotteries, you can get all that too.
Okay. Very good.
Oh.
Good. So listen, it's been a great conversation. And as you know, sometimes we say we're building a plane as we're flying it because we don't have all the answers and we're never going to have all the answers, but people need answers now and we're trying to come up with them as we're addressing the problems. And I thank all of you for being part of this conversation. And I'm very hopeful that we're going to help some people, and from the Jewish faith, they say if you help one life, if you save one life, you save the world. So we're going to save more than one life here today. And hopefully we're going to save hundreds by continuing to work. And I just want to thank everyone for your participation. Drew, Peter, Chibuze, Ms. Levin, people from the city, everyone who participated, and all of our partners here. I think we've got a great community. Together we can really get this thing to work. And we will be in touch with all of you. We'll send
Thank you, Miss Gloria.
Send you a copy of this event so you can look at it. We'll continue to keep in touch with you about upcoming events, and hopefully we can continue to make progress on this. And thank you all very much for attending.
Thank you too.
And Patrick,
Thank you, everyone.
I hope you
Thank
feel
you.
better.
Yeah.
Well, like I said,
Happy holidays, everybody.
Yeah, really.
Much.
Bye,
all right,
everyone.
thank you.
Thank you.
All.
Thanks, everyone.
Well, have a great night. Happy holidays.
All right.
Happy
Yes, good night.
holidays.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Chibuze.
Thank you,
Okay.
Mark. Thank you, Peter.
Okay, Peter. See you
Good work,
later.
everyone.